காஃபி இல்லை டீ ஏதாவது சாப்பிட்றீங்களா சார்?
இல்லை இல்லை தேங்க்ஸ், பரவாயில்ல. அப்பாவை இங்கே சேர்க்கணும்.
ஓகே சார், சேர்த்துடலாம். இந்த முதியோர் இல்லம் வந்து 45 இயர்ஸாக இருக்குது. இங்கே ஆல்ரெடி 50 மெம்பர்ஸ் பக்கம் இருக்காங்க. ஒரு ஃபாதர் மெயின்டைன் பண்ணிட்டு வராரு.
ஓகே, ஃபெசிலிட்டிஸ்லாம் எப்படி?
ரொம்ப நல்லாயிருக்கும் சார். இது முதியோர் இல்லம் மாதிரியே இருக்காது, உங்கள் வீடு மாதிரி நீங்கள் ஃபீல் பண்ணலாம். ரூம்ஸை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் ஏசி நான் ஏசி ரெண்டுமே இருக்குது. மீல்ஸ் வெஜ் நான்வெஜ் ரெண்டுமே இருக்குது. ஸோ நீங்கள் எது ப்ரிஃபர் பண்ணுறீங்களோ பண்ணிக்கலாம்.
ஓகே,
அப்போ ஃபார்மை ஃபில்அப் பண்ணிடலாமா?
ஷியோர்.
அப்பா பேர் சார்?
சுரேந்திரன்.
வயசு?
70.
அட்ரஸ்?
9 செந்தில் நகர், சாலிகிராமம், சென்னை 93.
ரூமில் டிவி வச்சுக்கலாமா சார்?
என்னப்பா டிவி வேணுமா?
டிவியெல்லாம் வேணாப்பா. நார்மலாக பசங்க டிவி பார்க்குறேன்னு பிடிக்கிறது இல்லை. எனக்கு எதுக்குப்பா டிவி?
இல்லைப்பா, தனியாக இருந்தால் போர் அடிக்கும். இருந்துட்டு போட்டோம், டிவி இருக்கட்டும். ஓகே
ஓகேங்களா? ரூம் ஏசியா நான் ஏசியா?
என்ன டிஃப்ரென்ஸ் வரும் டாரிஃபில்?
ஏசி வந்து 15,000 சார்.
ஓகே.
நான் ஏசி வந்து 10,000 ஆகும் சார்.
5,000 தான் டிஃப்ரென்ஸ்னா ஏசி ரூமே இருக்கட்டும்.
நோ 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 நோ, ஏசி வேணாப்பா. எதுக்கு ஏசி? இல்லை வேணாம்.
இல்லைப்பா, வெயில் காலத்தில் உங்களால் தாங்கிக்க முடியாது. இருக்கட்டும்ப்பா, ஏசி ரூமே போட்டுருங்க.
ஓகே சார். வெஜ்ஜா நான்வெஜ்ஜா சார்?
இல்லை, அப்பா வெஜிடேரியன், நான்வெஜ் சாப்பிட மாட்டார்.
ஓகே ஓகே சார். இப்போ டாரிஃப் வந்து மந்த்லி 25,000 வருது.
ஓகே.
நீங்கள் எய்தர் செக் இல்லை கேஷாக பே பண்ணலாம்.
ஓகே, நான் செக்கே கொடுத்துட்றேன்.
ஓகே சார்.
ஃபைன்.
தேங்க்யூ சார்.
சரி இருங்கப்பா, காரில் போய் லக்கேஜ் எடுத்துகிட்டு வரேன். ஹலோ, சொல்லுமா.
சேர்த்துட்டிங்களா?
சேர்த்துட்டேன். ஃபீஸ்லாம் கட்டியாச்சு. லக்கேஜ் எடுக்க காருக்கு வந்திருக்கேன்.
அப்படியா? எல்லா வசதியும் இருக்கா?
ஏசி, டிவி, வெஜ் மீல்ஸு எல்லா வசதியும் இருக்குது.
ரொம்ப சந்தோஷம். அப்புறம் இந்த தீபாவளி பொங்கல் இதுக்கெல்லாம் வருவாரா?
ஏன் வருவாருன்னு தான் நினைக்கிறேன்.
இல்லை, அவருக்கு அங்கேயே நிறைய ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ் கிடச்சிருவாங்க. நம்ம வீட்டில் வேற தீபாவளி பொங்கல் எல்லாத்துக்கும் ஸ்வீட்ஸ் வைப்போம். அவருக்கு வேற சுகரு. நம்ம வீடு வேற ரொம்ப தூரம். எதுக்கு அவரை கஷ்டப்படுத்தணும்னு பார்க்குறேன்.
சரி, நான் பார்த்துக்கிறேன்.
சரி, டாக்டர் நம்பரை தந்துருங்க. ஏதாச்சும் அவசரம்னா டாக்டருக்கே கால் பண்ண சொல்லுங்க.
போன வை, ஃபாதர் வந்துட்டாரு, நான் அப்புறம் பேசுகிறேன். வணக்கம் ஃபாதர்.
இவர் தான் என் பையன்.
காட் பிளஸ் யூ. என்ன பண்ணுறீங்க?
ஈவென்ட் மேனேஜர் ஃபாதர். ப்ரோக்ராம்ஸ் ஆர்கனைஸ் பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கேன்.
நல்லா போய்கிட்டு இருக்கா?
நல்லா போயிட்டுருக்கு.
இதை வாங்கிக்கோங்க.
சார், இந்தாங்க ரிசிப்ட்.
ஓ, தேங்க்யூ.
ஐயா, ரூமை பார்த்துடலாங்களா?
பார்த்துலாமே.
கூட்டு போகிறேன் ஃபாதர்.
போயிட்டு வாங்க.
ஆமாம் ஃபாதர், அப்பாவும் நீங்களும் ரொம்ப நேரம் பேசிகிட்டு இருந்தீங்க. அப்பாவும் இதுக்கு முன்னாடி உங்களுக்கு தெரியுமா?
அப்பாவை ரொம்ப நாளாகவே தெரியும்.
ஓ, அப்படிங்களா?
30 வருஷத்துக்கு முன்னாடி இங்க இருந்து ஒரு அனாதை பையனை தத்தெடுத்துட்டு போனாரு உங்க அப்பா. உங்ககிட்ட சொல்ல வேணான்னு சொன்னாரு. இருந்தாலும் மனசு கேட்கல. அதுதான் சொல்லிட்டேன். நீ ஒன்றும் கவலைப்படாத, பத்திரமா போயிட்டு வா. உங்க அப்பாவை நல்லபடியா நாங்க பாத்துக்கிறோம். ம்.
Hello and welcome back to Crossroads. I hope and believe you were blessed with last week's discussion. Well, I'm sure you've watched this video just now, and I'm sure you will be able to guess the topic that I'm going to be discussing this evening. In fact, it's a very important topic, and in fact, as I was preparing for this talk, I had to read through a lot of heartbreaking stories. So let me just once again tell you that children watching, there are young people watching, and perhaps even grown-ups who have elderly parents who are watching. And this applies to all of us, that we need to honor our parents, our father and mother. Let me just begin with a story. 75-year-old Lata remembers the heart-wrenching afternoon that changed her life like it was yesterday. She says, I had my lunch of chapatis and dal and was resting in my room in Karol Bagh, Central Delhi, when my son Amit walked in and asked if I would like to visit our relative in Ghaziabad in the neighboring state of Uttar Pradesh, about an hour's drive away. She was excited at the prospect of going on a car ride with her only son. I was looking forward to spending some time with him, she says. The frail septuagenarian agreed to the journey, not knowing that it would be her last time she'd ever see her son and his family. Although I was trying to make conversation with him on the way, he appeared to be deep in thought and was silent, she remembers. After driving about 40 minutes, once they were on the highway, Amit, who is 50 and a father himself, stopped the car near a roadside fruit stall and asked her to step out to buy some apples. As I was choosing the fruit, I saw my son start the vehicle, and before I could call out to him, he sped off, says Lata, a tear rolling down her deeply creased face. Initially, I thought he'd gone to fill petrol or buy something, so I waited in the hot sun for several hours, hoping he would return. But then late in the evening, the truth dawned on me. I had been abandoned by my own son, my only son and child. Taking pity on the elderly woman sitting sobbing by the roadside, a few local residents helped her to an old age home run by a charity in Ghaziabad. Emotionally distraught, she was initially reluctant to provide details about her son to the volunteers, but after much prodding, she finally revealed his address. A month later, representatives of the charity tracked down Amit to ask him to take his mother home, but he refused, saying he was disowning her as she was a burden to care for. A volunteer at the home that took Lata in 2 years ago says, a few months before getting rid of his mother, Amit reportedly made her transfer the ownership of her house to him. They took all I had and dumped me, she says. Clutching her walking stick, she gets up from her bed and makes her way to the window where she holds the bars and stares out. I hope I'll see my son at least once before I die, she says in a soft voice. Here's another story. I rely on my son and daughter-in-law to provide me meals and medicines. My daughter-in-law orders me to wash clothes and utensils, and if I deny, she threatens me of not giving me meals and medicines. When her son's family, go out, they lock me inside the house for long hours, says Savitri Devi, 71-year-old widow. While preparing for this talk, I had read many such unbelievable but true heart-wrenching stories of parents who were abandoned by their own children, some even abused and tortured before they landed on the streets or in an old age home. Young India sees parents more an obligation and not a part of the nuclear family, deserving of love and care, she says. A generation brought up by parents facing all the odds and hardships to give them a good education now believes their lives are complicated if their parents continue to live with them. Let me read some statistics and dated June 15. Denial of food and medicines, proper clothes, abuse, humiliation, beating sometimes, not allowed to meet grandchildren, relatives, neighbors, and friends, tied in case of disability, forced to do household chores, emotional blackmailing, snatching their belongings and savings, and useful legal documents. Those are some of the abuse that elderly people go through in our own country of India, which actually boasts of being conservative and respectful towards elders. Things are changing even in our country, as you know. Well, children are expected to respect and honor and obey their parents. That has been the general rule, and that's how it has been over through centuries. Let me just tell you a few Bible verses that talk about honoring parents. First of all, from the Bible I understand that honoring parents is a command of God. Exodus 20 and verse 12 says, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." I'm sure you're aware of the 10 commandments that God gave to the people of Israel, which pretty much applies to all of mankind, because God is the one who created us, and He has created us with certain moral values and principles and a conscience that pricks us when we go wrong. And these 10 commandments pretty much summarize the expectations of God from His people. And of the 10 commandments, one of the important ones, the 5th one, says, "Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." Another passage in the New Testament, in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 to 3, says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth." First of all, to honor your father and mother is not an obligation. That's what I understand from this verse that says, honor your father and mother. That's God's commandment to His people. It's not optional. It's mandatory. It's a command that God gives. The God who created us, the God who created family, the God who created parents and children, He has given us this ground rule which says, honor your father and mother. I mean, let's understand that it's a command of God Almighty. If you do not honor them, in fact, you're actually dishonoring God. It can't be that you love God and honor God and dishonor your parents, because the God Almighty who created us says, honor your father and mother. It's as good as don't honor your father and mother. Secondly, I understand from the Bible that honoring your parents brings God's blessings. Well, I understand that as days go by, things are changing in the world. Generations seem to be changing. In fact, they have something called a generation gap, which is perhaps the present generation thinks that the previous generation does not understand their lifestyles, their value systems, and their whatever they would speak and do. Whereas the Bible tells us that honoring parents brings God's blessings. Children today may think parents don't know a lot of things. Maybe children may think our parents are not tech savvy. Maybe they think you don't know the computers, you don't know how to use a smartphone, you don't know how it functions in our college today, you don't know what youth culture is all about, things have changed. Those are some of the arguments that children would perhaps bring up with parents. And especially around the teenage years, adolescence, children seem to have a rebellious attitude sometimes, or they begin to disagree with their parents, they begin to talk back sometimes, they begin to argue with them, they want to have their own way sometimes. But over here the Bible tells us children need to honor your parents because it brings God's blessings. The opposite is true perhaps then. If you don't honor your parents, you will lose God's blessings. The verse we read over here in Exodus 20 and verse 12 and Ephesians chapter 6 tells us that this is the first commandment with a promise. Well, promise of what? Promise of long life. Promise of a blessed life. Well, the olden times, the commandment was literal. For the people of Israel, when God gave this commandment to honor your father and mother, it was a literal commandment. It was a literal statement that they would have long life if they abided by this commandment. Because if they didn't by this command. If they disobeyed their parents and dishonored their parents according to their customs, the child or the son or the daughter, I mean, they were stoned to death. That's what scripture says. That is how it was back in Deuteronomy chapter 21 verses 18 to 21 says, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, he will not listen to them, then his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives, and they shall say to the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious, he will not obey our voice, he is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Basically, it was given as a command that if there are children who do not obey and dishonor their parents, they were supposed to be stoned to death so that they would get rid of evil from the community, so that it will serve as an example for all the other children that they are not supposed to be dishonoring their parents. That is how literal it was, which means your life will be cut short if you dishonored your parents, even in the literal sense. But even in the figurative sense, if you say, if you obeyed your parents, you will have a blessed life, a long life, a blessed life. If you do not honor your parents, obviously you cannot be at peace. Although you ignore your conscience, you may have all the possessions and think that you are blessed, but you definitely will not have peace at heart. You may have to live with a guilty conscience. And sometimes some children understand it the hard way. I mean, they rebel against their parents, they go against their wishes, they perhaps, some of them leave home, some of them, I mean, like, they don't want to acknowledge their parents' authority, and then they get into a lot of trouble, and then they realize they shouldn't have done this. In the Bible, we have a story of a father who had two sons. The elder son was an obedient son to his father and did everything that his father had asked him, but the younger son was more of a rebellious kind, and in fact, he asked his father for all his property, and he wanted to leave home, and that's what he did, and he squandered away all the money. And later on, when he was struggling in absolute, he was having nothing, and in fact he had to beg for food, and he was wandering all over the place, wanting to eat even the food that was offered to animals. That's when he realized the love of the father. That's when he realized his father's house was a lot better than all of these pleasures that the world could give him, and he repented and he went back to his father's house. He says, in fact, I will go back to my father's house, and I will in fact at least be a servant in my father's house, because even servants get good food in my father's house. And actually, when he went back home, thinking his father will not accept him, thinking he will just be glad enough to be a servant in his father's house, the Bible tells us that the father was looking forward for his son's return, and when he saw his son afar off, the father stretches out his hands towards the son and runs and embraces him and welcomes him back home, because he says, this son of mine who was lost has come back. And so the father rejoices. That's the father's heart. Children may sometimes rebel and go away from the parents and maybe go away from home, but the parents' hearts always long for their children, and they're willing to accept them back. Son returned, the father prepared a huge banquet and invited everybody and celebrated, saying, this lost son of mine is found. God was simply trying to tell us that we many a times are lost like that. We rebel against God, we disobey God, we don't like His laws and His rules and regulations given for us, and we turn our backs on Him and try to run away from Him. But when later on we realize that we have gotten ourselves into trouble, when we come back to Him in true repentance, our God, like a loving Father, is willing to accept us once again. So, honoring your parents brings blessings. You may try to brush it under the carpet, but it will not work, because the conscience will still. Let's understand, honoring your parents brings blessings. Don't lose those blessings. Thirdly, honoring your parents brings wisdom. Proverbs 1 and verse 8 says, listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. These proverbs were written by one of the wisest men who ever lived on this earth, by King Solomon. He says, listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Father's instruction, mother's teaching. I wonder how many children listen to the father's instruction and mother's teaching. Proverbs 13 and verse 1 says, "A wise son hears his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke." I mean, a scoffer is the one who does not listen to rebuke. Of course, you have to face the consequences. Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 20 says, "My son, keep your father's commandment and forsake not your mother's teaching." When I was growing up, my father is a pastor and I grew up in a pastor's home. My dad was a very strict disciplinarian. In fact, for the slightest thing we would get spanked. I remember that there were certain rules and regulations that my parents had put which we were not supposed to transgress. In fact, one of those times when I was actually in college doing my BA degree, I came back home around 10 o'clock in the night. Now 10 o'clock perhaps for many of you is pretty early in the night. But 10 o'clock according to my parents' standards was too late to return home. And since I came back home and I knocked on the doors of my house, I knew that my dad and my mother and my sister actually were awake. I could see them talking to themselves, talking to each other. But no one came to open the door. And I understood that my dad was very angry with me for coming back so late according to our standards. So 10 o'clock was very late for my dad. And so after at least some 20 minutes of knocking, he came and opened the door and he was furious. And he said, "Let this be the last time you're coming back home this late." And that was enough for me to understand that my dad was very angry, because I mean, they know from their wisdom and from their age, they know what is good for their children. And that's why we were expected to listen to my father's instruction. So it says, "Listen to your father's commandment and forsake not your mother's teaching." And I thank God for such strict disciplinarians that my parents were, because it served me good to keep me in the right track. Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 1 says, "Hear, O sons, a father's instruction, and be attentive that you may gain insight." In other words, a wise child, a wise son or a daughter will be willing to obey their parents' instructions, because it says you will gain insight. Children who obey their parents' advice and wise counsel will be wise and save a lot of trouble, because they're older in age and they have wisdom, and also because they are your parents, they will want the best for their children. So listen to your parents, honor them. Fourthly, honoring your parents is your responsibility as a son or a daughter. Honoring your parents by taking care of them is your responsibility. Proverbs 23 and verse 22 says, "Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old." Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old, which means it tells us that it is our responsibility as children to take care of our parents. Honoring parents is your responsibility as a child. No matter how old you may grow, you may have your own children, maybe, but still, I believe it's your responsibility to take care of your parents. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8 says, "Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." You have to provide for your own relatives, especially for your own household. Of course, your parents. Taking care of your parents is your responsibility, not the government's responsibility. Many of those children try to shirk off their responsibility. If they are from the poorer background, parents, elderly parents, are left on the streets to fend for themselves, to beg maybe. If you are from well-to-do families, they send their parents off to an old age home, where many of those parents live with so much of struggle and unable to admit and accept the fact that their own children have actually left them over here in an old age home when they actually long to be with them. When did we become like that? Shouldn't we be grateful to our parents who took care of us when we were children? I mean, when we dirtied the place so many times, weren't they patient enough to clean up? Weren't they patient enough to feed you? Weren't they good enough and kind enough to send you to school and to be waiting for you when you returned home from school? Didn't they cry with you? Didn't they take good care of you? Shouldn't it be our responsibility when they are old to be taking care of them? and not get upset with their behavior when they are old, or perhaps some of the things that they would do or speak? Shouldn't we be grateful to them and take care of them for all the sacrifices that they have made for us to get us wherever we are? Well, in conclusion, the Bible tells us, it has in fact already warned us, that all the evil that we witness today is going to happen. In 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 1 to 6, it says, in the last days there will be difficult times, for people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their own parents and ungrateful. Disobedient to their own parents and ungrateful. That's what the Bible says as to how people will be in the last days. It has already warned us. So I believe we should take the caution and the warning and not lose all our blessings, but rather honor our parents. And let me read another true story. Ruby, who has also been abandoned by her daughter, has decided to give up contacting her children and her grandchildren. She says, I just started to feel like a stalker and have now decided to get on with my life. Of course, it still hurts, but I keep myself busy. I have joined a club and I practice yoga and dancing, and she says that's how I keep myself occupied. Ruby recalls with angst her own mother, who she left in England to migrate to Australia. I used to receive letters from her all the time, letting me know how much she missed me and how sad she was not seeing the children grow up. I now know how she feels. What does that teach us? It simply tells us, never forget that you too will grow old. If you're a child and if that's how you're treating your parents, not taking care of them, understand that you too will grow old one day. And as they say, what goes around comes around. Therefore, let me just conclude by saying the Bible encourages us. It's a command of God. Honor your father and mother. Honoring your father and mother is God's command. Honoring your father and mother brings God's blessings. Honoring your parents brings wisdom. And honoring your parents is your responsibility as son and daughter. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you that you have given us this privilege to explore this topic, which perhaps we may not think about many a times. But the Bible says, honor your father and mother, that you may live long, which is a commandment with a promise. I pray that everyone who is watching, whether they are little children who need to obey and honor their parents and take their advice and their instructions, or whether it is grown-up people who still have their aged parents, I pray that you'd help us to understand that honoring our parents is God's command, that it brings God's blessings, that it is something that we ought to be doing. It is our responsibility. I pray that you would help us to honor our parents and to take care of them, those who took care of us, and help us to receive your blessings. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, if you have comments and feedback, or maybe some questions that are bothering you on this topic or any other topic that we have discussed in the past, do write back to us, email us, or call us on the number that is there on the screen. We'd be glad to respond to you. God bless you.